I have been on this journey to play through the entire Trails series for about a year at this point, and I have come to discover two important things as I've been on my Trails journey. One, Instructor Sara is one of the most attractive women I've ever seen in gaming. Shouldn't come as a surprise if you've ever even looked at her for more than a millisecond. And two, Falcom are genuine masters of taking a game and improving upon every aspect of it for its sequel. And boy oh boy, does that show with just how damn good Cold Steel 2 was. This sequel really saw all the issues I have with the original and basically said, hey, let's fix almost all of them to create an insanely fun experience. But what exactly made it that way? What were all of the things it improved upon? And was there anything it actually fumbled? Well, let's get into that, shall we? Hey y'all, it's Crimson Rosso, and here's my review of Trails of Cold Steel 2, and how it was better in pretty much every single way. Alrighty, for my first bit of praise, I'm going to start off pretty strong here. So let me give a Cold Steel 2 a big ol' round of applause for once again knocking it out of the park in terms of design. In my first Cold Steel review, I praised the game for its nice graphical design and impressive levels of scope, despite dealing with the limitations of a handheld. And that very respectable level of scope is still most definitely there, if not even more noticeable now due to all of the new locations. Some of my personal favorites have to be Reen's hometown Ymir for my obvious clear bias towards snow-based areas, plus the pretty fun snowboarding minigame you can play there, the Zemurian ore shrines even if they feel rather samey, and best of all, the final dungeon known as the Infernal Castle because of, well, I mean, come on, just look at this place. It just screams badass final dungeon. Another improvement to the game's overall look were the character designs themselves. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it in any of my vids or on Twitter or just any of the things I'm on, but I'm really not a fan of the school uniform outfit on every character idea. I don't mind it if it's on like a singular character, but when every character has one, it makes the character designs not really stick out. It was something that actually plagued Cold Steel 1 and made me more or less stick them in their alternate casual outfits instead. Thankfully, Cold Steel 2 doesn't really have this problem, as everyone's original outfit in this game is incredibly fantastic and look great. They give each and every party member a visual flair that allows them to stand out much more visually than the school uniforms did. And if you miss the casual clothes, you can still equip them if you want, plus you get an extra outfit, and a lot of really fun new accessories. Well, outside of those really creepy ride-along dolls. Other than that, though, I don't got much else to say about the graphics. So let's move on to gameplay next. Now, like several other Trail sequels, Cold Steel 2 takes the original gameplay and evolves upon it to make it a much more enjoyable and interesting experience. So, what exactly did they improve upon in terms of gameplay? Well, for one, characters will now automatically link up with each other instead of forcing you to have to manually link them yourself. A much welcome addition, as I still recall how tedious it got to have to constantly relink characters every time my party member swapped out. You still have to relink them when you die, sure, but I'm more okay with that being the only reason you have to relink them now, as the process is now far less of a pain. Of course, that isn't the only change to the link system, as there was one more addition, and that is the inclusion of the overdrive mechanic. What's overdrive, I hear you asking? Well, they function as a retooled version of Azure's burst system, where you fill up a gauge, mainly through combat, and when it's maxed out, you freeze time for a few turns and are allowed to do whatever you wish without any consequences. Deal free damage, cast arts instantly, you name it. But there are some certain factors that make it a lot more different from Azure's burst system. For starters, the only people who can take part in the overdrive are the two party members linked together, and you get a total of 3 turns max instead of the 5 or so you get in Azure. Adding on to this, while characters linked with Reen can perform overdrive, you cannot perform overdrive with others unless you complete the all-new trial chests with the set duo themselves. I know it sounds like I'm saying it's a worse version of the burst from Azure, but there are some genuinely great pros I have for overdrive that balance it out. For one, it's much easier to fill up the overdrive gauge than it was to fill up the burst gauge, leading to it being used far more in combat. Also, when you are in overdrive, every attack is now a critical, which can be utilized to help earn easy bravery points, which help with setting things up like the Rust and Burst link moves. And finally, unlike Azure's burst mechanic, you can actually stockpile overdrives to use not only back-to-back, but whenever you want, which is super helpful for boss fights, as it's basically multiple rounds of free ass kickings. And that's all for the changes to the first half of combat. So now, let's talk about the second half. I'm of course referring to the Divine Knight battles. Now, Divine Knight battles were actually something introduced in the first Cold Steel game. But the thing was, they appeared at the very end of the game. And I mean last hour, the literal last hour of the game is when these things show up. As a result, I saw no real reason to really talk about it in the review, since it's over just as fast as it begins. However, in 2, they become a mainstay of combat, and it was way more entertaining than I expected it to be. Unlike normal fights, you battle one enemy at a time here, and have to destroy them one by one to win. It's way more tactical than the normal battles you go through in the game, and I think that's its charm, as it feels genuinely different. Plus, it has a lot of neat ideas added on. You now rely far more on the unbalanced system than normal, as that becomes the main way to deal more hits in one turn, and since these battles are you fighting alongside in your knight, the rush and burst commands are changed to basically be super moves that drain chunks of your opponent's health. All the while your party members aid you by either casting EX arts with varying abilities, the best ones are healing you and restoring your CP, and refilling your EP. You can also equip a new type of orb onto Valimar called the EX orbs, which are, well, they're just normal ornaments if I'm being honest, but it's still pretty neat, god dang it. And that's pretty much it for the combat. So how about we get to the biggest aspect of this game? And that is, of course, its story. And oh my god, I fell in love with it. This story plays off almost everything that Cold Steel set up phenomenally, and led to it becoming my third favorite game in the series so far. What happens in this game? Well, it kicks off with Rean waking up after the battle with Crow at the end of the first game, and learning a full month has passed since then. As such, he starts to feel fear and despair that his friends are in danger due to his own weakness. A concept I've always been a fan of, as it's a great way to have your characters learn to rise again. And the way they have Rean regain himself is fantastic, as it's all thanks to his little sister Elise. Now, like Valimar in my Cold Steel 1 review, I didn't really talk about Elise all that much, because she barely has any presence in the story, and is kind of only there to unlock Rean's secret Super Saiyan power, and have an insanely obvious crush on him. She's more a plot device than an actual person. However, Cold Steel 2 changes that and gives her one of the best moments in the game by being the one to restore Rean's broken confidence after everything he has went through. It may be minor in the grand scheme of things, but I like how they gave Elise more depth than just being the I like Rean girl. She helps kickstart Rean's journey of growth and become the heroic leader Eoboria needs. Of course, all good things have to come to an end, as both her and the princess are kidnapped by the Ennoble Alliance once they attack Ymir, and now Rean must set off on a journey to reunite all of Class 7 and save his sister and the princess. And the entire adventure is absolutely filled to the brim with craziness. Crow and Rean develop a rivalry as Rean works to surpass him and bring him back to Class 7. Class 7 struggling to find a way to end a war without picking a side in it. You get to interact more with the rest of the Imperial Liberation Front and learn more about who they are as characters. You meet Fee's old Jaeger group members who hilariously act like a couple of overprotective gay dads who will kill you if you dare touch their little princess.
But you haven't tried making any moves on her, have you?
No.
Certain Class 7 members get more revealed about their backstories. You get new party members in the forms of Claire, Toval, and best of all, Sharon. And I'm gonna tell you right now, she's probably one of the single most broken party members in the series so far. And best of all, Ouroboros finally returns to being a central part of the story again, after really only being part of the main story for about an hour in one. We're getting to see the moments like Blue Blanc and Oliver being rivals and, let's be real here, besties every time they talk with each other, to the point where they just rather throw a party and hang out than fight. Their relationship is still probably one of the best in the entire franchise. Along with Duvalie being the top tier girl failure that she is, those are not the best moments. No. That easily goes to the fact that after all this time, you finally get to meet the #1 enforcer of Ouroboros himself, the strongest member of them all, next to the Spear Maiden or Lance Maiden or whatever she wants to call herself, Mick Byrne. And he is awesome. Not only does he have one of the single best designs in the entire series, he's also just as strong as they state he is. Like, this dude is on a level that makes you wonder how the fuck they're gonna beat them. Plus, he has a very interesting tie-in to Rean of all people, as they both end up having the strange dark power inside of them. The only difference being that while Rean has a small fraction of it inside of him, Mick Byrne's whole body is infused with it, and he doesn't care about anyone else unless they can actually give him a challenge. Hell, in the final dungeon, one of the best moments is that he just straight up tells Rean to summon his Divine Knight since he doesn't even think their group is worth his time. And when you finally see him go all out, it is a spectacle. It really makes me curious on what they plan to do with him in later titles, because as I've stated earlier, he is painted as this force of nature that no one can stand a chance against. It makes me interesting how they're going to deal with him. And that's all I'm going to say about the story and characters. And while I've been talking about it for a lot, I gotta say this right now, there is so much I just didn't cover. There's stuff with Angelica and her father, meeting Rean's parents, the absolutely insane reveals at the end of the game, getting to play as fucking Lloyd. So much stuff happens in this game. But I'm gonna hold myself back so everyone can have as much fun as I did experiencing this game. And if I tried to continue this, like, the video would probably be like 50 minutes long, and I'm not going to torture myself to edit all of that. Like, I got a full-time job. I kind of need the time for it. So, let's instead move on to my last bit of praise instead. And that's just how much better the music was in 2. I wasn't really a massive fan of Cold Steel 1's soundtrack, outside of like maybe 2 themes. But 2 is an absolute jam. The new battle and dungeon themes are incredible at conveying the atmosphere. The Zemurian shrines have an OST that gives them this mystical and otherworldly feel. The final dungeon has this track that genuinely makes you understand that if you fail here, it's pretty much all over. The boss themes are amazing, so much is just so good. And with that, we have wrapped up my pros for Cold Steel 2. So now, we will get into the cons. Get ready, y'all, it's finally time. So, for my cons section, I'm going to start out by saying this. Cold Steel 2 is one of those games where I kind of struggle to find a huge amount of issues with it, as like I stated, it massively improves on pretty much everything the first game had, but there were some complaints I did end up having. So let's start off with the more minor stuff first. For one, Cold Steel 2 has a couple padding problems. Now, these padding areas don't appear super often, but they are quite noticeable when they do. The main one I want to talk about is the Zemurian shrines. The hidden shrines you go to obtain Zemurian ore so you can make a sword to place Rean on equal footing with Crow for your giant crazy battle. It's a cool concept, sure, and I do like aspects of the dungeons like their music and boss fights, but you then realize you have to do them multiple times in a row, and it just gets kinda tedious. I think they should have tried to incorporate more story beats in between them, like they did when you first visited the shrines. Because it just boils down to doing the same shrine with like a slightly different layout 3 times in a row. They're still fun. Like I stated, the boss fights and the music are still really enjoyable. But I don't think they needed to have more than like 2 shrines, and they just needed to be spaced out better. Another issue this game had was its difficulty, or rather a pretty severe lack of it. Outside of a few key moments, Cold Steel 1 is easily one of the most less difficult games in the entire series. I had heard from some friends who have just completed the entire franchise so far that they are getting even easier after 2, and if that's so, that's a little disappointing. I'm hoping they're wrong and just misremembered, but only time will tell. But I really wished this game gave me more challenges than just a few moments I had. And for my last minor issue, I really wish we had learned a little bit more about Rean's dark power. We finally get some small snippets from our interactions with McBurn, but that's about it. Rean learns to harness it, sure, but we still have no idea what the fuck it even is. All we really know is that it's tied to both him and McBurn, and we still have no answers. I'm really hoping we get an answer in 3 because I'm starting to get kind of tired of them beating around the bush on this concept. And those were my more minor issues. So let's get to my major gripes of the game itself. First off, good old Duke Kanye West here is probably the weakest villain in the entire franchise so far. He has no screen presence in comparison to Ouroboros or the Liberation Front members. Hell, fucking Duvali is more threatening than the Duke of Earl here was. Let that sink in. Duvali was more of a threat than this guy was. He just kind of stands around and just talks. He has little to no, just anything in this story. This guy is the head of the Noble Alliance. Then actually make him threatening instead of just this loser who just goes like, we do this thing, and then we do this thing. For being the head of the main faction you deal with in the game, he feels like such an afterthought in comparison. This is the one thing I genuinely think Cold Steel 1 did a lot better with their Noble Alliance. But I digress. Let me get to the other stuff. Issue 2 is locking certain pieces of lore behind a New Game Plus was an absolutely fucking horrible idea. For some reason, Cold Steel 2 decides to tie important lore bits to completing a second run on New Game Plus. Because, fuck your first run, I guess? And there are two in particular that they do this with. The first is the Black Records, special books that further dive into the lore of the Trails franchise. The Divine Knights, Septarians, all of that and more. But the only way to get your hands on them is to replay the entire game and battle certain monsters to unlock them. So basically, you have to sit through the entire game twice to get all of the story. Horrible idea. Again, I cannot stress this enough that this was bad. This also ties into the second other thing you get if you play a New Game Plus, and that is the reveal of Instructor Thomas's true identity. Instructor Thomas, throughout 1 and 2, has been that one guy you constantly see throughout both games that gives off the vibe he's a lot more than what he seems. Not only with his knowledge, but he also seems way stronger than a normal instructor should be. But it's just never revealed who he is. Unless you do this Black Records quest in New Game Plus, where it's revealed that he's not only been an undercover member of the fucking Septarian Church, but he's one of the Dominions as well. So, to get one of the most mind-blowing reveals in the entire game that may actually be rather important for ongoing events, you have to do a side quest that, again, I reiterate, you can only do in the New Game Plus run. Why? Why not just reveal this at the end of the normal game instead? Or just let me hunt down the Black Records in my first playthrough. There are side enemies I can fight that give me lost arts. Just tie them to those for a first playthrough. It's so fucking pointless. And that's the first of the two major issues. The second is actually very important that I definitely need to bring up as it revolves around a game-breaking bug. Towards the later half of the game, you will watch a cutscene of Class 7 resolving themselves to liberate Thor's Academy. It's one of the game's best moments as it shows just how much they've all grown as characters. And wouldn't you know it, the scene later on crashes the game because it cannot load it right. So if you didn't save before this, you are fucked. I don't understand how or why this hasn't been fixed after being known about for years at this point. Maybe it's because it only affects the PS5 version, which, yes, this is only on the PS5 version. Not the Vita version, not the PC version, not any other version but the PS5 one. Even so, that's kind of unexcusable. Even if it works on every other version, you can't just ignore it on the last one. That's lazy as fuck and disrespectful to the people who bought your product on that console. Over time, people have discovered a way around the crash, like holding down circle to skip the cutscene. But it's basically the equivalent to putting a band-aid on a broken leg. It's a minor solution to a larger problem. Outside of that, I don't have any more issues with Cold Steel 2. So I think it's time we moved on to my final thoughts on the game. Cold Steel 2 really proves that Falcom, out of every company in the world, are some of the best in the business when it comes to the art of making sequels. While I do admit, everything here didn't exactly land on its feet, the amount of times it did, however, far outnumber them. That's why my final rating for this game is a very nice and very improved 9 out of 10. And with that stated, that is all for this video. We are now officially halfway through the Cold Steel arc, and I am excited to see what's next. But for now, we are playing Nayuta, folks. Scratch that, we actually just beat it a little while ago. So expect that review in a bit. Thank you for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, do me a favor and like and subscribe down below, and leave a comment down below to either help me in the algorithm or if you just want to chat. See you all next time for more content.